In the recording, yeah. So I've just introduced myself and as usual forgot to start the recording. So I just wanted to do a quick recap that today's webinar is specifically devoted to the field of educational neuroscience. So educational neuroscience is an interdisciplinary field, and these days you might have heard the science of learning. Yeah, so how we learn better. So this is what educational neuroscience is concerned with, how we learn better. So the health and well-being, cognitive health, cognitive activities of learners. Yeah, so learners is the key. So we call this field educational neuroscience. This is cognitive neuroscience applied to education. And, when we talk about linking neuroscience to education, it's important to remember that translation is not easy. Translation and, implementation science, as people call it, but I would call it implementation art because implementing the research findings and bringing them into being is not just science, it's a first and foremost art. Yeah, is an artistic endeavor. You need to be an artist there. And yeah, implementation science is a difficult endeavor. And bringing neuroscience to education, the whole field has embarked on a mission. It's a mission. It's not just, exploring and digging deeper, finding understanding in these complexities of the human brain and human mind, but also having the capacity to and having the people in place to translate these to educational applications. And of course, it's not an easy task to perform. And we are going to talk about it later. So we are Neurocom 25. We call ourselves a cord of 3 strands to reform education: neuroscience, happiness studies, and future studies, which taps into the science of learning, unlearning, and relearning. So today we will be focusing on the neuroscience strand, the neuroscience arm, and how neuroscience can improve education, enhance learning, and make potential. And let's get started. So first of all, whenever I talk about our lab and the foundations and how it all started, I always quote Alvin Toffler. Alvin Toffler was an American futurist, and as a futurist, he was interested in the things, in the things that are coming, right, in the future. And he did research, he did studies, and he quoted also well-known psychologist that the illiterate of the future are not going to be those who cannot read and write, but are going to be those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. So the illiterate of the future are people who don't know how to learn, unlearn, and relearn. We talk about literacy in education, and there might be comments that there are a lot of illiterate people in terms of reading and writing. And this is true. But if we talk about being competitive and if we think further, think about the future and talk about even surviving, not just thriving in a new era of AI, we have to think about being illiterate or literate of the future. Yeah, not just in a common practical sense of the word being literate or illiterate. So I think Alvin Toffler was spot on, and he probably was envisioning artificial intelligence and metaverse, because maybe not just envisioning, but he knew some things, and we know that artificial intelligence has been around for a while. It's just us who were allowed to have access to it right now. But it's been around, and some people, of course, not in such extent as we have now. But I think the companies, the corporations have been using it for some time, but it's becoming mainstream, and it means that everybody is going to be affected, related to it, yeah, somehow, and we need to become literate of the future, which is gaining this ability to learn, unlearn, and relearn. It seems obvious. Learning, knowing how to learn, you go to school, you go to university, you take a continuous professional development courses, right? And you learn. But not that obvious. There are processes that are happening in the brain, right? Affective processes, meaning what you're feeling, your emotions, your sensations, and also physical processes that are happening. And all these processes, and physical environments as well, yeah? By physical, I mean environments, not just you. You are your body, where you live is your first physical environment, your first built environment, but also the environments that you face, yeah, that you encounter in your life. They are also your physical spaces. Yeah, so learning happens in these three stages, yeah, and in these three levels. So the first level is cognitive, then we have affective, and then we have conative, yeah, which is behavior, action, will, volition. And it's important to have this holistic bird's eye view, and looking at the process of learning and learning outcomes. Because when we talk about learning, we talk about the process, and we also talk about the outcomes. Yeah, looking at these from the three pillars perspective, from the perspective of learning, cognitive process, affective process, and conative process. Unlearning, cognitive, affective, and conative, and relearning, cognitive, affective, and conative. And also each of them can be separated in terms of, studying. Like we have neuroscience for learning, the science of learning. We have happiness studies, the science of well-being for unlearning, when we unlearn what goes against our eudaimonic pursuit and our hedonic happiness, yeah, our pleasure in life, yeah, joy, having fun, and relearning as well. This is future studies, yeah, when we talk about systems thinking, mindset, when we see the world in terms of complexity, in terms of systems, and how they interact and how they are connected to each other. And also futures literacy, when we are literate, as Alvin Toffler said, and we are ready, yeah, to meet, to encounter the future. So this is relearning. And it's very important, as I previously said, to address them all. And that's what we are doing in Neurocom 25. Also, very important is just gonna take some tea. It's getting dark. I've had a long day, been talking for a while. So it's a nice peppermint tea. So very good and very surprising. We've got I forgot his name during the last webinar, but Mark reminded Demis Hassabis. Demis Hassabis is a prominent researcher of AI. He actually graduated also from my university, from UCL, University College London. And he's done a lot of work that he even got rewarded by the Nobel Prize last year. And attention, Demis Hassabis was saying that, I will just read that out loud. I will cite that for you. Google's top AI scientist says, learning how to learn will be next generation's most needed skill. That's it. Period. So we've been talking about that as educators, as educational neuroscientists, people who are in this field. And myself, I've been a lifelong learner all my life, so I walk the talk. I've studied philology professionally, of course, graduated with the degree. I studied neuroscience professionally, graduated. So breadth, depth, and integration of knowledge. I studied Middle Eastern studies at Oxford. So also professionally lived in the Middle East. And, for me, being a lifelong learner and knowing how to learn is not just words. I have been embodying it. Yeah, so I can talk about it. It's very important to embody what you are talking about. And I was really I wasn't surprised, but it was a nice thing to hear that the Google AI top scientist said that learning how to learn will be the most important skill of the 21st century. And this is why we're here. Yeah, that's why in Neurocom 25, we are going to help you how to know, to learn how to learn. But I would also add to Mr. Hassabis to learn, unlearn, and also relearn. But he probably didn't read Alvin Toffler, so he doesn't know. But anyways, the message is the same. Learning how to learn, unlearn, and relearn. This is the key to success and to survival. Yeah, if we just not just to think about thriving, and being successful, just to survive in the new era of AI. And the solution is the trilogy of education. Yeah, so I always teach about the trilogy of mind, cognition, conation, affection. Yeah, and we pioneered the trilogy of education frameworks, theoretical research, that we address cognition through research in neuroscience and applications of research in neuroscience. We address affection, through research in the science of well-being and its applications, so its happiness studies. We address conation through research in future studies. So we call it the trilogy of education. From the trilogy of mind, we went to the trilogy of education. And these are interdisciplinary frameworks because, these days, looking at something just from one angle is not enough. Yeah, we live in a times of super complexity when it's really important to look at things from different angles. Yeah, and this is what I like doing in my life and what I did in my professional life as well as a practitioner. And this is what brought me to neuroscience, to educational neuroscience in particular. And that's what I will be talking about today, is my search for different angles and for different missing pieces of the puzzle. Yeah, there is a big puzzle, big picture, and we have to find out the missing pieces. And these are, of course, conation, affection, and cognition, affection and conation together. Yeah, we can't leave something out of this equation. Yeah, they all belong there and they should be addressed together. All right, so, and the first one in the equation is neuroscience. Particularly, we talk about cognitive neuroscience, how mind is connected to the brain, the biology and psychology together. This is called cognitive neuroscience. I know a lot of people keep talking about, like, they've heard something like neuropsychology, but guys, neuropsychology, it means you study the brain based on lesions, yeah, on lesions, on trauma, right? So people who have problems with the brain, like wounds, lesions, these sort of things, we can study the effects of that on cognition and mind, right? So if you think that neuropsychology is so much applicable to education in a practical sense, I don't think so. I know it sounds good, psychology and neuro together, but in reality, it means something absolutely different. So it's cognitive neuroscience and emotional intelligence. Why emotional intelligence? You've heard about emotional intelligence. There is plenty of research. There is a wonderful book by Daniel Goldman, which I read long, long ago. But among all these strange intelligences, as I call them, emotional, we also have, I mean, let alone, besides the IQ, yeah, the intellect, we talk about spiritual intelligence, we also talk about aesthetic intelligence. And emotional intelligence is not about self-regulating for the sake of others. So that should be the key point, because people sometimes confuse, they think that emotional intelligence is to be a good girl, or a good boy. You should be emotionally intelligent. If you're intelligent, if you're angry, you should keep it to yourself. Of course, you should be, you shouldn't be, harmful to people, even psychologically, mentally. But emotional intelligence, first and foremost, is to regulate yourself in order to reach your goals, not somebody else's goals, not to be a good girl or a good boy. Good girls and good boys usually have bad health and have no money. Yeah, so don't be a good girl, be emotionally intelligent, girl or boy. Yeah, so self-regulation. In educational research, we call it self-regulated learning. Yeah, so self-regulated learning, when you use emotional intelligence, if they call it emotional, let it be emotional. If you use emotional intelligence to regulate yourself in order to reach your personal, professional goals, which means sometimes you don't go out when everybody is going out, yeah, because you have stuff to do. And this is emotional intelligence. Sometimes you keep your mouth shut. Yeah, you see stupidity around you, but you're like, no, I'm not going to say anything because it's not going to change anything, right? Just spoil your relationships with people. So, and you keep your mouth shut. And this is emotional intelligence. So, emotional intelligence is your regulation. Yeah, your ability to regulate yourself, but not empathy, sympathy. No, empathy is aesthetic intelligence. I know it's too deep for self-help books and so on, but that's the truth. Yeah, so emotional understanding is aesthetic intelligence. Emotional intelligence is self-regulation. That's why it belongs to neuroscience block. Yeah, to neuroscience block among these three subjects. Yeah, neuroscience, happiness studies, well-being, and future studies. And happiness studies, yeah, it's spiritual intelligence. Spiritual intelligence is secular. Last time I said it's not secular. That was a slip of the tongue. When I watched the recording, I realized that I was a slip of the tongue. So spiritual intelligence is secular. It means it has nothing to do with religion. Yeah, it means you are driven by your values. You're driven by virtues, of course, in general. You build uh, based on the virtues. Yeah, you work, you go to work, you're conscientious based on your virtues that you have. Yeah, that your parents instilled in you, that your religion, it might be instilled in you, but it obviously spiritual intelligence, it doesn't belong to any particular religion. So you build based on goodness. Yeah, you want good for yourself. That's why you want good to people. Because if you want good for yourself and don't want good to people, it means you want bad for yourself. It's difficult to understand. So what you want to others, you want for yourself. Yeah, that's the key. And this is spiritual intelligence. Yeah, don't wish to others what you don't wish to yourself, and not just in your actions. Yeah, also subconsciously. Some people maybe they don't even realize that. Yeah, subconsciously they wish something to others without realizing, but it happens to them because this is the law. Yeah, we're not gonna go deep into psychology. Psychology, yes, not philosophy. Yeah, but still, these things are related, and sometimes it's really good to explore. Yeah, so spiritual intelligence is what drives you in life, in your professional life, and in your personal life. And being spiritually intelligent, it means being able to operate using this software, because you might have this software, but as soon as you go out, you go to the gathering, you social gathering, and you lose your spiritual intelligence. Yeah, you become like everybody else in the world. Yeah, you support everybody, you do what everybody is doing. No, spiritual intelligence is your ability to say stop to the things that are against your values. Yeah, your core values, your professional ethics. Yeah, so in any profession we have ethics. Like in education, yeah, we have a set of ethics that we follow, and this is also spiritual intelligence. Yeah, because we think about the flourishing of children, the flourishing of colleagues, and so on. So it's quite an interesting topic, but spiritual intelligence is about the interconnectedness of the right and the left hemispheres of the brain. Yeah, the interconnectedness of all things. It includes emotional intelligence. So emotional intelligence is that very sort of when you are trying to, when you're clinching, with your fingers, and when you don't let yourself do things that you might feel like doing. Yeah, but emotional, that was emotional, but spiritual is more like the foundation. Yeah, the core. So the leaders that have spiritual intelligence, they're people of dignity. Dignity, what is dignity? Be honorable. This word honorable has been forgotten by people. People make business, they don't understand what is being honorable. Yeah, they meet people, they talk to people who are only higher in ranks. Yeah, if you do this, no matter, yeah, sometimes there is the protocol, if you are a scholar, a scientist of a particular level, you usually don't put likes on LinkedIn. Don't like the posts of people of lower level. This is sort of the protocol. But I think, of course, some things you don't have to do. Yeah, we're not talking about liking everybody, we don't have time for that, obviously. But being honorable, treating people, based on the values, because if you can't, from one well cannot be bitter and sweet. Yeah, if you treat somebody bitter and somebody sweet, then there is a question. Yeah, which water, what kind of water is in your well? Is it sweet water or bitter water? Yeah, this is a question then. So this is spiritual intelligence. Whatever business you do, cities that you build, countries that you rule, yeah, top managements, especially for managers, yeah, top management, school management, yeah. So you will have no happiness if you don't have spiritual intelligence, if you don't have values, and if you don't enjoy life, yeah, you don't enjoy being operating in this system that you have built for yourself. Okay, and we have the future studies. This is the third element of what we are doing. I'm just speaking in general. I will try to cut down as time is ticking. So the future studies. Future studies is a very interesting field because it allows us to choose our futures. So it gives us hope that the future is not predetermined, that there are preferred futures, and we can, by analyzing, by thinking, by planning, thinking out loud, yeah, making some scenarios, we can decide on the preferred futures for ourselves and then stick to them. So basically, in some even languages, in some, if people know, you can correct me if I'm wrong, like African language, there is no understanding of time that we have. Yeah. So they have time is now. Yeah. So there is no future for them. In Greek, we have kairos, we have chronos. Yeah. There is aimon or something like another variation, more like sort of spiritual, but the two major are Kairos and Chronos. Yeah, Chronos is the chronological time, yeah, the time frame that we live in, and Kairos is the event, yeah, that happens at a particular moment, and this is an opportunistic, having this sort of opportunistic attitude to seize the day, yeah, and take the opportunity when it comes to you. So Kairos is the right time. And future studies, very important in educational research, because future studies, they help us to understand that, children, especially children from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, that education can change their lives, and that they have the opportunity to choose their futures, that their futures are not predetermined, that there will be that kairos, yeah, in their lives, that opportunity that they will seize one day if they study hard, and if they have good teachers, of course, who support them and who believe in them. And this is future studies. But interestingly, how it relates to neuroscience, yeah, it's just the subject that we use to teach that. But in terms of neuroscience, this is aesthetic intelligence, and aesthetic intelligence is emotional understanding. Now, what some people sometimes mix up with emotional intelligence. Yeah, it's empathy, because you have your mirror neurons. Yeah, you feel the way people feel, and empathy is not just that. For example, when I see the cup, my brain doesn't just see the item, this any kind of item. My brain also sees what it affords to me. So the cup affords me drinking. It means this is aesthetics and affordances. Yeah. So all the items that surround us, they have aesthetics. Yeah, they look somehow, and they provoke higher order processes in the brain. Yeah, aesthetics and beauty, this higher order processes, reward system that are included, that are connected, yeah, to the reward system in the brain, as well as the affordances. They afford something to us, and our brain considers it as action. That's why if you surround yourself by the items, it's just a practical tip very quickly, that allow you something, that allow you to think bigger, yeah, that allow you to take some action. There is a possibility that it will happen faster. So surround yourself with beautiful things, because this is the higher level of reward in the brain. compared to lower level, like food, for example. Yeah. And also they will afford your action. And that's why this is volition. Yeah. And this is future studies. Okay. And very quickly back to neuroscience. So that was an introduction. And the field of educational neuroscience was created in the 90s, in the decade of the brain, when the former, at that time, President George Bush, or so to speak, encouraged everyone, researchers and universities, to look into the human brain. And we have lots of neuroimaging machines appearing, lots of technology appearing to help to support this research. And at the University of Harvard, Department of Education, there was a professor called Kurt Fischer, and unfortunately he passed away in 2020. That's really unfortunately, because he was a great person, and he was really somebody who envisioned what the field is about, who had that vision for the field of educational neuroscience. But it was called, and is still called, Mind, Brain and Education in the States, but in the UK and Europe it is called educational neuroscience. And that field studied its existence, so to speak. And there is also a wonderful professor, Usha Goswami. She's at Cambridge University. She was also at the very beginning of the field, and they have their publications, sort of consortium, as you call it, like the gatherings when they gathered and they decided, and thought what would have been the future of educational neuroscience, of mind, brain, and education. And plenty of interesting things. And also, currently, I think the strongest center for educational neuroscience is the center at the University of London, but between Birkbeck College and University College London. This is where I studied. So I think it's the strongest in the world currently, and there are plenty of very, very good, fascinating professors, experts in educational psychology, in cognitive neuroscience, people who have been applying cognitive neuroscience to education, and lots of trials already conducted, lots of studies conducted, and education endowment foundation, EEF, is actually something that if you're a teacher, you can use their materials for free all the time. They publish recent findings, and they publish it in simple terms, so the language that they use is very very clear for teachers. It's not like reading scientific papers, so you might take a look. So, but educational neuroscience is for everybody. It's not just for teachers who are at schools. This is for teachers who teach at organizations. Whether you are a teacher at school, or a leader, or you are teaching happiness in their organizations, or marketing, it doesn't matter. Educational neuroscience is how to learn, or you just learn it. If you have subordinates as a manager, as a CEO, you also need to teach them, right? And you also need to deal with learners. So this field is for everybody. But of course, it's so important to shield the vulnerable, in this case, children, especially children from low socioeconomic backgrounds that cannot stand for themselves now. And for them, this is an opportunity. I mean, you learning educational neuroscience and its application is an opportunity for them, right? So we are doing it for them, but of course for all the lifelong learners out there, and myself included, how to make your learning journey interesting, and understand why your best practices work and why something doesn't work. It's good to know when you buy the phone, you have to know how it works. Yeah, you read the manual, so it's good to know how things work in general. But I'm not gonna promise you, oh, you will neuroscience if you study, brain friendly. There are no brain friendly techniques. How your brain likes to learn, how your brain doesn't like to learn. So if you hear things like that, this is a scam, and they usually go with very high price tag. So don't fall for that. There is no brain friendly, just snake oil salesmen and women. They offer brain friendly techniques. There is no brain friendly techniques, unfortunately. We have implications. Yeah, we have research that can be translated, and it is translated. And if you want to hear the recent findings, go to Endowment Education Endowment Foundation. They have it free and in simple language. So, educational neuroscience, progress and prospects. Professor Michael Thomas, who was one of my professors teaching the genetics, cognitive neuroscientist at the University of London, a wonderful paper. I think this is a seminal paper because you will understand why now. Because this is exactly the way we connect neuroscience to education. And that was the topic of today's webinar. So the way we connect neuroscience to education is directly and indirectly. If you understand this, you will look at what they offer you in the market through the different lens. You will use different lens to evaluate all these sort of courses that they offer you. So number one, neuroscience is by virtue linked to education because brain is a biological organ for learning. Is this correct? Yes. We have the brain and it's an organ used for learning. So education, learning, yeah? So we call it the direct link between neuroscience and education. So then the question is, how can we apply this? How can we translate this? What is the bridge? So the bridge is brain optimization. How to optimize our brains in order to be in the proper state for learning. Yeah, if we are in the proper state for learning, if we are not anxious, yeah, we don't feel anxious, we are calm, we feel relatedness, yeah, to the people around us, to our classmates, group mates, colleagues at work, yeah. We eat well, yeah, we have more protein, especially for women, yeah, less carbohydrates, more vegetables. We do physical activities because it's about brain-derived neurotropic factor, yeah, which is the protein that involves in the process of growth, yeah, of new cells, and it's important, especially for children, to move more. Yeah, so diet, nutrition, rest, sleep, and touch as well. Is interestingly that hugging children, of course, we know that this is not something that we do at schools, and here in the UK, I'm not saying to do that, but you have your own children or very, very little children. You have to hug them because touch is very important for brain optimization. There have been studies on that in Romania. The children from in the orphanage, the nurse was stroking them, one category, and the other category, one group, another group of children were not. And when they grew up, that group were more successful people. There was a longitudinal study on that. So if you have a child, especially little child, just have them on you all the time, hug them. And in general, in the Middle East, I think in some cultures, it's very common. People hug each other because they're more close in more close need societies actually. Yeah, it's quite common, so it's good for your brain as well. If you have nobody to hug, try to have a pet. Yeah, if you can allow to have a pet, just hugging or hug yourself. Yeah, because it releases oxytocin, which is the hormone of bonding. Yeah, so bond with yourself if you have nobody. But I like hugging, for example, of course, my family, but I like hugging horses. I'm a horse rider. And for me, hugging the horse, the neck of the horse, this is the biggest happiness and oxytocin. Yeah, so this is brain optimization, how we can optimize the children's brains. Also mindful breathing, yeah, meditation. So the message is clear, optimizing the brain for learning. Yeah, optimizing the brain for learning. And indirect link is through psychology. Yeah, psychology studies behavior. Yeah, behavior and behavior affect learning, right? And it's connected to education, of course. Yeah, so we have psychological theories that are shaped by neuroscience. Yeah, neuroscience research should be mapped onto, yeah, the psychological theories. So it's a two-way street. Yeah, it's a bi-directional relationship. And psychological theories, for example, growth mindset. Yeah, we know we talk about neuroplasticity, that our brain is moldable, yeah, that is plastic, that we can change. But of course, it's not to the extent that people usually think, because it requires time. Yeah, when we talk about translating neuroscience, we talk about the time. Yeah, of these interventions. There are no miracles. For example, I am a multilingual person, and my brain is different for sure than the brain of the people who physically different, the people who speak one language. But it took me my lifetime. Yeah, I've been studying languages since I was very little, so it takes a lot of time. Dancing, yeah, I was a professional dancer in the past. I love dancing. So it's also, the dancers' brains are different, but it takes a lot of time. Yeah, music. I'm not a musician, unfortunately. I would love to learn to play the piano, but for example, the school friend of mine, she's a musician, and it took her all life. I remember when we had a final ball, she didn't go. So Lida, if you're watching, hello to you. And she didn't go to the final ball at school because she had her music exam the other day. So it took her all her life and effort. So let's don't be fooled. Yeah, please don't be fools when someone is telling you, "Oh, your brain is plastic." Okay, you read the book, your brain changed. Yeah, it doesn't work like that. Yeah, there is no magic here. So all this translation, it requires time and it requires effort. It requires effort. And as you can see, yeah, we've got brain optimization, meta states. Yeah, any kind of mindful, and also I've forgotten to mention, it's getting late. I'm just losing track. So the best way to translate neuroscience to education, yeah, talking about practicalities and non-invasive, because how some people imagine that it's somehow like you use the EEG maybe or something. No, transcranial, there is transcranial brain stimulations that are used at schools, and they are used for children with ADHD mostly. And in China, I know that they have some current stimulations. But again, there have been some studies and they happen to be positive, but the researchers keep saying that we have the lack of longitudinal studies. We don't know what's going to be further. Yeah, there is some effect, and also it's expensive, and also you need a psychiatrist, yeah, the person, a professional who is going to prescribe, yeah, all these. So somebody who's going to you know, be responsible for that. Yeah, the teachers are not going to do it. So this is not the best, probably, I can't say not the best, but not the most cost-effective way to bring neuroscience to education. The most cost-effective and the most practical and the most possible, because you are going to be involved in it directly, yeah, as a student, as a teacher, is metacognition. Metacognition, it means knowledge about your thinking, or I would say applied knowledge. Applied knowledge. This is metacognition or meta memory, as John Flavel called it. The concept was developed by an American psychologist, John Flavel, in the 80s. And metacognition, it has 5 main principles that we use to connect neuroscience to education. And by the way, what I'm telling you now is, it took me a lot of time to untangle, because this information was like, all over the place. So I published on research on this topic. Metacognition is my topic. And what I'm telling you now took me time, effort, and money. And as you know, in science, you pay to be published, unfortunately. Yeah, so this is the case. In science, it's very interesting and funny, and ridiculous that researchers do the stuff, and they also have to pay money to be published. But anyways, so just wanted to introduce it for you to have a flavor of what it means to present this information in a way that I'm doing it now, in a way that is clear to everybody, and not in a research language, yeah, but in practical terms. So we have the meta state, which is how we connect neuroscience to education through direct way, bringing our brains into proper states. We have meta knowledge. It's executive functioning, metacognition, meta experiences, meta goals, meta strategies. So all of them matter. So we have 5 of them that are important. So if we talk about the psychology, the executive functioning, yeah, executive functioning is your memory, your current memory, your cognitive flexibility, and your inhibitory control. Yeah, the way you can inhibit your thoughts, which is unlearning. So, and we have all these 5 that we apply: meta knowledge, meta experiences, meta goals, and meta strategies. And also, the last but not the least is meta motivation. And meta motivation is how you can motivate yourself. Yeah, because intrinsic and extrinsic motivation is not the case. It's not the case. Yeah, it's about being able to self-regulate. It's why we call it emotional intelligence, yeah, and self-regulated learning through growth mindset, attention regulation. That's what we teach how to do it, and delayed gratification. And this is my research, where I completely, talk through it. And the most important, I think, the cherry on the cake of today's webinar is that Kurt Fischer, the one I told you about, the founder of the field, he believed that there should be the middlemen, the educational engineers, as he called it, the people who are going to connect the dots and be the bridge between research and practice and translate neuroscience to education. And that's what he believed in, and we did it. We are launching the first ever course. It should be a short course, but it's not that short actually. But for within the period of 8 weeks, you will learn how to apply neuroscience to education through metacognition. But being an educational engineer means being a change maker in your institution, either it's your school or your organization where you work. So being somebody who is going to help people how to learn and bring this knowledge of the science of learning to them, because we teach you the foundations of research, that when you hear about brain friendly, quote unquote, programs, you understand that this is what's going on. Yeah, this, when you hear about these programs, you understand that it's no good. Yeah, because you have the knowledge of correlation and causation, the difference between correlation and causation, that correlation does not mean causation in research, right? So this is how it looks like. And it's really a unique program that will allow you to become this middleman between the teachers and the researchers. So you will understand how to read research, how to understand research. You will be able to conduct programs in metacognition. So this course is about metacognition. And I will read our definition of an educational engineer. So an educational engineer is a professional who systemically applies cognitive science research to the design, implementation, and evaluation of educational interventions, serving as a critical bridge between scientific knowledge and classroom practice. So this gap, we have to close the gap. But to close the gap, we have to alter the loop. Yeah, alter the loop, the feedback. So this person is aimed to alter this feedback loop and close the gap between research and practice. And here we see that everything is interconnected. Yeah, we have the learning outcomes, but besides, we have so many factors influencing the learning outcomes, factors like government, policies, and educational engineer is that person who is going to look at learning systemically, yeah, as a system, and understand that everything is interconnected. Understand the child factors, yeah. The children might come from households where they go through adverse childhood experiences, for instance, yeah. That's what we are going to teach you, to really be able to translate research into practical applications. And you'll see that's the lessons that you're going to be having. Yeah, for instance, you're going to have the introduction, the what means being an educational engineer, foundations of metacognitive engineer, because metacognition is the how of learning, and it needs really this engineering approach. Sustainability planning, because when people talk about sustainability, they think about the what you call it, the green, everything green, yeah, so water and so on. But greenery can be schools, and education is also greenery. So this is sustainable planning. Sustainability means long-term outcomes, when you not just think about yourself, you also think about your children, your grandchildren, your great grandchildren. Yeah, this is sustainability. Being sustainable meaning being built for a long term, cost effective, yeah, and pleasant and good, yeah. So sustainability planning, how we can place sustainable classes in metacognition. Also brain optimization plan, how to help your learners and how to you will be able to teach the teachers in your schools how to implement neuroscience research, neuroscience evidence, or you will be able to teach in organizations as well, because these days, guys, content knowledge is fine, but if you teach, you have to teach content. But if you teach content and metacognition in parallel, you're gold. You're golden. Nothing, nobody will be compared to you. So for this reason, we created a course. This is the one of a kind pilot program called Educational Engineering. You will get a certificate, educational engineer, and it's a pilot program and it's almost free, almost. We only charge for the platform that the course is in, because it all costs money, obviously, for work that people were doing on creating this course, and myself included. But it's just 99 great British pounds, and this is, believe me, nothing for the course of this caliber and of this kind, because I believe, my strong conviction is that knowledge is free. Yeah, it's just a matter of time, of course, that you spend on delivering that, on compiling the courses, but in general, there should be no big price tags on high price tags on knowledge sharing. So this is my personal philosophy, so to speak, and I would really like to generously share this pilot course with you. So if you're interested, please let me know. And I'm going to wrap up today. Thank you guys who were attending here on Facebook, and people who will get the recording. Thank you as well. And stay safe, everybody. Bye. Have a good night.